Hello, welcome to Ghost Stories for Christmas. I'm going to be reading A Last Chance Christmas Miracle by Matthew Brockmeyer. Chapter 1. Seth. Seth crept along Last Chance Creek, lifting up rocks and looking under ferns for red-bellied newts, plucking the slimy little critters up and dropping them in an old plastic bag. His heart still stung from his father and brother calling him a sissy boy. He weren't no sissy boy, fuck them. Fog slithered down from the hills and he shivered, pulled the old army trench coat he'd picked up at the surplus store tighter as he crunched through dead leaves and tangles of whitethorn, now headed back up to Popper's compound, the bag of wiggling amphibians clutched tight against his chest. He had on his corpse paint, black and white grease paint he smeared on his face, like all his favourite black metal bands. He liked the feeling of looking dead. The warbled cry of a rooster rang out. Popper and Jedediah loved them damn chickens. Was going to raise them some of their own fighting cocks. Seemed like that was about all they loved, that and meth. At the old chicken shack on the edge of the property, Seth squatted, reached into the bag of squirming newts and tossed one into the pen, watching curiously as it landed on its feet in the dust, darting its eyes before making a run for it. Seth smiled as the flock descended, all flapping feathers and dinosaur feet, digging their beaks into its head and eyes, flipping it over and tearing open the soft crimson belly, pulling them red guts free and fighting over the ropey innards. He thought about his mom, how she'd left him here in this cold world, reached into the sack and tossed the chickens another one. That's when Popper's voice came booming down the hollow. "Seth, you out there, boy?" Seth sighed and thought about running back into the forest, back down to the creek where everything was still and quiet, but knew there would be hell to pay if he ducked out. "Yeah, Popper, I'm here." "Get your ass up here, boy, we're going to town." "But I don't want to go." "You ain't got no choice, boy, now get up here, we got some shopping to do." It was Christmas Eve, and his father was celebrating by churning out a batch of his famous peppermint-flavoured shake-and-bake meth. He'd need the whole family to buy up as much Sudafed as they could. There was a 2-box limit per person, and Papa was going to need a lot of Sudafed. Grudgingly, Seth got up, tossed the bag of the newts into the pen, and started a slow meander up the rocky hillside, past the rusted hulk of the Chevy Malibu, up on blocks and stuffed with trash, and piles of bottles and tyres, till he was passing Granny's trailer, back hidden in the trees. All the pretty flowers she had planted about, the tomatoes and squash, now withered and dead in the cold and darkness of winter. Frail and white-haired, she sat on an old lawn chair, little AM radio crackling with the word of God and repentance, an overflowing ashtray on the bedside beside her. She waved to him, calling out, "Jesus loves you, Seth," as he passed. "Yeah, Granny, I know it," he said, stomping through the poison oak and manzanita scrub, and to the cabin where his father stood on the mouldering back porch with his arms crossed, his fat belly poking from behind a Harley-Davidson shirt. Popper shook his big head, ran a hand over his beard. "Get that shit off your face, boy. You ain't going to town like that. What in the hell's wrong with you?" "Nothing, Popper. I just like it, is all." "Shit, what you need is to get laid. Some pussy'll set you right, give you some of that self-confidence them teachers say you need." Seth stared at the ground and kicked at the dirt. Fuck his teachers. He hated his teachers. Hated the school, his classmates, the jocks and rednecks and the rich kids and the girls, all the pretty girls. Hated everyone. But he snuck a suppressed grin, thinking about those chickens, their cold black eyes as they ripped and pecked at the bloody mess of them newts and the poison within them. "Damn straight it would," his older brother Jedediah said, strolling up with the 30-06 rifle slung over his shoulder, all tall and lanky, long pale arms poking from his sleeveless flannel like albino spider legs. "Just what this little sissy boy needs. Look at him, wearing makeup." "It's not makeup, it's corpse paint." Jedediah guffawed, set the rifle down on its butt and slapped his knee. "Corpse paint? You ever seen a corpse, kid?" He looked up into Seth's face, lip curled over his yellow teeth. "It's not exactly what it looks like. The corpse's lips are blue, a soft blue, like a robin's egg, and the eyes got a yellow to 'em, kinda like a bruise. You just look like you got run over by one of them trucks that paints white lines on the road. Ain't that right, Popper?" Popper laughed. "Or a darn run over skunk." Seth knew better than to say anything more. It only made it worse. "Can I please just stay home?" "Hell no," Popper said. "You're coming to town. Ain't you got no Christmas spirit?" Chapter 2. Griselda. Griselda walked the littered path that led under the bridge, into the sour stink of piss, trash, and the salty bay, clutching the package to her chest. She wanted another hit of speed, could feel the need inside her, an ache, but knew she'd have to sleep if she wanted to work tonight, and fought against it. How do we get to the places we are, she wondered. We don't dream of it as kids, it just happens, goals and dreams whittled away by time and failure. She saw the man there, curled up against a pylon, the bay lapping only yards away from him. He used to be a customer of hers when he'd first got back from the war in Iraq. She'd given him many a lap dance, they'd even had a fling before she started turning tricks. But between his PTSD and her stripper lifestyle, it was doomed and had only lasted a week. She hadn't planned on being a stripper, was an all-A student in high school, working her way through community college, thinking maybe an RN, hell, even a doctor, why not? But she needed to pay the bills, and a friend introduced her to exotic dancing. The money flowed. It was easy to balance it all at first, but she was tired, exhausted from studying and classes, and working in the club late at night. When she'd hit the meth pipe and could dance for hours in a trance, it just made perfect sense. But then the classes stopped, the partying increased, years slipped by, her beauty going too, so she wasn't making what the new girls were. Couldn't perform with the gusto their young souls could. The fire had been fucked from her, and she turned to the streets. "Archie," she said, coming upon him. "Come on, Archie." He shook his head. "That you, Griselda?" "Yeah, baby, let's get you away from the water." She helped him up, led him into a little concrete sanctuary beneath the bridge, and eased him down. "Here," she said, taking the package. "I've got some blankets for you, and a sandwich and some soup. Soup's still hot." "Ah, bless you, bless you. Merry Christmas, honey." Chapter 3. Seth. Seth sat between Granny and Papa on the big bench seat as the old Chevy pickup rattled and wheezed into town. Granny chain-smoking parliaments the whole way and talking about Jesus and the spirit of Christmas. Town was all decorative lights and fake snowmen, glittering green wreaths of moulded plastic, giant candy canes, bustling families and smiling children. Seth hated it all. It wasn't fair that Jedediah got to stay home, and the thought kept bugging him. How come Jedediah gets to stay home and I don't? Papa cranked the wheel hard, the shocks squealing as the pickup swung into the Walmart parking lot. "He's hunting, bringing us food for the table. We all got to do our part. Besides, he's 18 and a man now. You just 15, Squirt." "I'm almost 16. "Yeah, well, almost don't count." They went into the store one at a time so as not to attract attention. A Salvation Army Santa ringing a bell at the big entrance. Papa headed to the camping section for the Coleman camping fuel, Granny to electronics for lithium batteries. Seth was supposed to just grab a couple of boxes of Sudafed, but he had an idea. All of the swimming pool maintenance product were removed to make well for the Christmas crap, but he thought he knew where they might be stored in the back. He made a beeline for the bathroom, but took a left through the big double doors into the storage area. Snaking through the maze of boxes and shelves, he finally found the pool supplies: skimmers, filters, packets of chlorine, and finally, a box of contractor-grade muriatic acid. Slipping the box under his belt and down his pants, he heard footsteps approaching and turned to hear, "What are you doing back here?" An older woman in thick glasses battered her wet eyes at him. "You're not supposed to be back here." "I was looking for the bathroom and got lost." "Bathroom's out there. Can't you read?" "Sorry, ma'am," Seth mumbled, ducking his head and quickly darting back through the corridors and into the bright fluorescent light of the crowded store. Back in the truck, as they rattled down the road to Walgreens, Seth slipped the box out of his pants. "Papa, I know you don't need this, but I thought I'd grab it for you, 'cause you want your Christmas batch to be special." Papa had picked up one of them red and white Santa hats and had it perched on his big head, and damn if he didn't look like some kind of demented Saint Nick with that big beard and potbelly. He cut his gaze from the box to his son, his eyes going soft and weepy. "Muriatic acid? How did you find this time of year?" "I've got my ways." "Oh, you are a good boy. Maybe I've been too harsh on you. Definitely going to get you something special this year. We're going to stop at the last chance store on the way home and get you an ice cream cone." "Papa, I'm a little too old for ice cream cones." "Bullshit, never too old for a darn ice cream cone. Tutti fucking fruity." Chapter 4. Griselda. Griselda stubbed her cigarette into the ashtray and squinted out the motel room window, the street slowly filling with the crazies that came creeping out at night. She only had enough cash for a few more days, so she was going to have to work tonight. No two ways about it. She lifted the little baggie of crystal and poked through it, already getting dangerously raw. How had she gone through that much already? Pulled a shard up with the long fake nail on her index finger, dropped it into the blackened end of her glass pipe, and thought about tonight. Turning tricks on Christmas Eve was always weird. Could go either way. Everyone on the streets was lonely and sad, and he didn't know if he'd see a depressed father of four looking for comfort, or some psycho bent to kill. She took a hit, held in the smoke, and steeled herself up for another night on the streets. But first she was going to see a psychic and have her cards read. Talking to Gwendolyn was her therapy and stress relief. She always made everything feel alright, no matter how fucked life had gotten. Chapter 5. Jedediah. Jedediah tooled his father's pickup through the alleys and streets by the bay, cruising up and down west of the tracks where the cheap hotels and dangerous bars all lay, peering through the headlights at the lonely, desperate, lost souls on the streets on Christmas Eve, looking for a hoe for his little brother. The family came home from town all happy and giddy, Papa exclaiming how wonderful his little chicken shit Seth was for stealing him some muriatic acid. saying he wants to get him something special, a hoe to pop his cherry for him, make him a man. Fuck yeah, Jedediah knew where to get that run of hoe to bust his cherry. He knew just the one, and just what he'd do with her too after. Didn't matter how much it cost, she wouldn't be leaving with that money. She wouldn't be leaving at all. He'd be itching for some killing lately, just about all he could think about. He'd killed 2 women that he'd picked up on the street already, left them out in the back roads, place where no one ever goes. Visited them a couple of times. He really liked that. Something weird about it, watching them change. He even liked the smell, so strong and foul at first, but slowly you got used to it. Learned to relish it even. But what he wanted most of all was one he could keep at home, one he could watch change, and visit, and talk to, and fuck, whenever he wanted. But be with till she was nothing but bones. He already had a place staked out for her, a nice shallow grave over the far hills, a secret place. He could hide her good there, so no one could find her except him. Chapter 6. Seth. Seth ground the Sudafed into a coffee grinder, while Popper, looking like some kind of crazed mad scientist Santa with his red pointy hat and bushy beard, swimming goggles stretched over his eyes, and big yellow rubber kitchen gloves over his beefy hands, delicately measured out the lye, ammonium nitrate, and Coleman camping fuel into various mason jars and coffee mugs. Then they set to work on the batteries, using a pipe cutter and needle-nose pliers to open them up, careful not to accidentally short the battery out while they peeled the casing away from its outer components. Then the core was out, and Popper was peeling it open like a roll of duct tape. Popper tossed aside the black protective layer, and there was the lithium, a long roll of shimmering metal, already beginning to tarnish and turn brown as toast just from being in the exposed air for a second. Popper folded it gingerly and dropped it into a jelly jar of denatured alcohol for later. Popper smacked his gloved hands together, eyes bulging out behind them goggles, Santa hat jiggling on his head, and explained in his loud, deep voice, "Now, the fun part." Chapter 7. Griselda. Griselda was about to pack it in when the old Chevy pulled up beside her. It was late and it had been a slow night. She hadn't gotten near the money she'd wanted, but it looked like her luck had changed. He was a regular, more or less, young redneck kid, always vanilla and fairly polite, never any trouble. He said he wanted her to come back to his place in the hills to bust his little brother's cherry, and he'd make it worth her time. It was to be a Christmas present, after all. $500 to come out and spend the night. $250 now and $250 after. He'd drive her back in the morning and buy her breakfast to boot. She was a little nervous, but it was nearly Christmas. He seemed like an alright guy, a little rough around the edges, but nice and polite enough. What could go wrong? Chapter 8. Popper. The ammonium nitrate, Sudafed and Solvent were in the old Dr. Pepper 2-litre plastic bottle, which Popper had drawn a big smiley face on, calling it his baby, and beginning to bubble. Popper gave that weird impish grin of his and raised up a peppermint candy cane. Secret ingredient, he winked, dropping it into the hissing amber liquid. Then he plucked the strip of lithium metal from the alcohol and began tearing bits off, dropping each one into the neck of the bottle. "Alright, now's when it gets crazy, so just stand the hell back," he said, sprinkling in the lye, careful to thickly coat each piece of lithium. Then he added the water, which immediately caused a reaction with the lithium, the whole mess violently bubbling as Popper slammed on the top and screwed it in place. When the reaction slowed and the mixture began to calm, Popper screwed off the cap, quickly poured in the camping fuel and slapped the cap back on. Then the solution went absolutely nuts, some kind of magic witch potion, fiercely bubbling, roiling and fizzing. Popper smiled, pulled the Santa out from his round head and placed it on the bottle, the crude fireless face below it, grinning away. He rocked it in his arms. "On this day a child of God was born," he proclaimed, a devilish glint to his eyes. Chapter 9. Griselda. Jedediah was quiet as the old pickup truck bounced off the pavement and onto the maze of dirt roads, chewing his bottom lip, his eyes glued to the road. Griselda sat back and thought about a tarot reading earlier that day. The cards were weird, scary even, but a psychic didn't read them that way. She saw hope. The first card, the cover card, had been the Tower. She'd always hated that card, a card which is the same upside down or right side up, and signified shock, havoc, and trauma. Just the image of the bodies tumbling down from the lightning-struck tower inspired fear in her heart. But Gwendolyn had said not to worry. It also meant a moment of truth, freedom, and enlightenment. Then she took the second card and said, "This crosses you, for ill or good," and laid the devil down sideways over the tower. Again, that fear bubbled up in Griselda, especially as Gwendolyn said, "These are your demons and the darkness within that are calling on you to see them. But look, see the human couple chained there? See how the chains about their neck are loose and could easily be lifted off, freeing them? So too can you lift your chains of bondage and be free. but only if you choose to. There was a 10 of swords, a corpse filled with blades, the 10 of wands, a load too heavy to carry that must be dragged, an upside-down moon, confusion and strife, and last was trump 13, death. Liberation and ending, for good or bad. Remember this, Gwendolyn told her. The future is not carved in stone. The cards don't make the future, you do. The devil's chains can always be lifted off. Chapter 10. Seth. When Jedediah walked through the door with the woman, Seth felt his jaw drop and stomach descend, as if he had accidentally walked off some fog-obscured cliff and was now tumbling through space. She looked exactly like his mother. Jedediah started introducing her. This here ornery old man is Popper, and this weird little runt is Seth, the one I've been telling you about. She smiled and waved, saying hi, and no one seemed to notice. How could they not see she looked exactly like Mama? Had they really erased her from their minds, all traces of her from their memory gone? Most pleased to make your acquaintance there, young lady, Popper said, strolling up with the bottle cradled to his chest. And this here's little baby Jesus, just getting ready to spread the good news. Don't pay no mind to that crazy old coot, Jedediah said, leading her to Seth's bedroom door and motioning her inside. And here's where the magical deed is going to be done. Seth just sat there, stunned and without words, his body gone stiff and cold like a corpse's would. What you waiting for? Popper asked. Get on in there. Seth's mouth was dry, desert sand. Popper, I can't. By God, you can and you will. This is costing us a lot of money. Now get your ass on in there before I open up a can of whoop-ass on you. Hesitantly, Seth rose and followed her into his room, Jedediah laughing and slamming the door shut behind them. Chapter 11. Jedediah. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow, Popper exclaimed, peering into the 2-litre as the tiny white flecks of meth began forming in the amber liquid. Jedediah sat at the kitchen table, cutting himself a line of crank and snorting it up. Woo-wee! He exclaimed, leaping to his feet and shaking his head as his heart thudded in his chest like a rabbit in a snare. Blinking and grinding his teeth, he opened the back door and stared into the fog and gathering murkiness of morning light. Christmas Day. Fuck, gotta take myself a walk. Gonna leap the old lizard and check on the chickens, see if any of them hens gone broody yet. I'll be here burping baby, Popper said, settling back in his chair and easing the cap on the 2-litre, a puff of pure ammonia gas leaking out. Oh, baby's got some stinky farts. Chapter 12. Seth. Seth stood with his back to the closed door, staring at his feet as Griselda approached him. Now I know it's your first time, honey. Don't you worry, ain't nothing but a thing. She took him by the hand and coaxed him to the bed, where he sat down, nervously wringing his fingers. Gonna be all right, Griselda said as she reached over and began to unbuckle his belt. I can't do this. Sure you can, honey. What's the matter? Don't you like girls? No, it's not that. It's just you look like my mother. And at this, Seth couldn't control himself any longer and began to cry, softly, sinking his face into his hands, trying to control the quiet sobs that backed through his shoulders. Oh, honey, it's okay. Shh. Griselda stroked his hair. You want to talk about it? Seth shook his head. Come on now, tell Griselda. It'll make you feel better. She killed herself, right there in the other room, blew her head off, and I had to help clean it up, bits of her skull with hair still stuck on them. Oh, baby, that's horrible, just horrible. I'm so sorry. But that's not the worst. The worst is that after she died, Papa said we could never speak her name again, took all her pictures, all her stuff, everything of hers that was left, and burned it. Said anyone who ever mentioned her name again was going to get a beating, and I miss her. I miss her so much. She was the only one who ever loved me. Shh, there. Seth slumped over in Griselda's lap. She held him and rocked him. It's okay, honey. We don't need to do anything. You just want to hold me for a while till you feel better? She nodded, and she stroked his hair and held him in her arms. And he did feel better. Much better. The toxic pressure he hadn't even realised was building up in him released, a haunting and heavy weight gone, like stripping off soaked clothes after being caught in the rain. Chapter 13. Jedediah. Jedediah stood in front of the chicken shack in a rage, shaking like a bottle rocket about to go off. All the goddamn chickens were dead. Every last one of them, laying about the pen all contorted and twisted, beady eyes bugging and little tongues poking out all swollen. And in the middle of them, a dirty plastic sandwich baggie with a couple of purple newts squirming around inside. He knew exactly what had happened. That goddamn Seth had poisoned them. Poisoned their family future, and the little runt was going to pay. He picked up a hunk of rusty iron piping, hefted its weight, heavy and dense. Fuck yeah. He stormed up the hillside, stomped onto the porch and threw the door open. First he was going to pound that little runt's face to a pulp, and then he was going to strangle the whore and fuck her corpse. Halfway to Seth's bedroom, He cut his eyes to Popper, sprawled in his chair, fast asleep, stupid Santa hanging off his head, the grinning 2-litre bottle bulging in his lap. Fucking idiot, gotta burp the baby. He set the pipe down, grabbed up the bottle and started to unscrew the cap, and that's when it exploded in his hands. Chapter 14, Griselda. Seth and Griselda lay in bed beside each other, he curled up like a baby while she spooned him and stroked his hair. The poor boy, he was sleeping now, his breath coming in a sweet, quiet rhythm. She was glad she hadn't fucked him. Kid was screwed up enough. Didn't need to lose his virginity to no messed out hooker. She hoped talking about his mother made him feel better. It felt like something he had kept bottled up inside. It made her think about her own life, the pressure that built up inside that you didn't even notice, the way frogs in slowly heated water just sit there and don't jump out, like the chains around the necks of the humans on the Devil's Tarot, easy to lift off if they chose. And that's what she needed to do, lift those chains off, get free of this life. Helping him felt so good, so right. Maybe after rehab she could become some sort of drug counsellor, help people like herself who were slid into some kind of nether life after making just a few wrong choices. That would be good. She's always wanted to be a nurse. Yes, that was it. It was Christmas morning, a new day, and she was going to change for the better. She smiled and tenderly kissed the back of the boy's head, like he might a sleeping baby. That's when the explosion rocked the cabin, shaking the foundation, the walls trembling, the noise deafening for a moment, then receding to the sound of screaming. She leapt up and threw open the door. Jedediah stood there, staring at stumps where his hands used to be, howling as blood geezered up. Papa was on fire, his beard and shirt aflame, trying to wipe the liquid flames off himself in a panic. Seth stood there slack-jawed and wide-eyed as Griselda grabbed a blanket off his bed and threw it over Papa, extinguishing the flames. Then she was in nurse mode, crying out for Seth to grab her some t-shirts, something to wrap on Jedediah's wrist to stop the bleeding. In a daze, Seth did as he was told. Chapter 15. Granny drove the old Chevy to the hospital, a cigarette dangling from her lips as the radio dialed to some weird religious station. On this holy day, children, we must shelter in the shadow of the Lord and bathe in the blood of the Lamb. Jedediah lay across Griselda and Seth's lap, spewing blood as they desperately clamped t-shirts to the stub of his wrists as he screamed. My hands! I've got no fucking hands! Papa was wrapped up in blankets in the bed, groaning as the truck screeched and skidded through the old dirt roads. Slow down, Granny, Seth screamed as the truck lurched. She took a drag of her smoke and cut her eyes quick to Seth. Just 'cause a cat has a litter in the oven, don't make them kittens biscuits, she said, cranking the wheel till the truck slid into them, barrelling downhill. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Jesus, Granny, I don't know you could even drive. Means I've been driving these back roads since I was a wee girl younger than you. Can't unlearn good driving, and don't be taking the good Lord's name in vain, boy. Chapter 16, Griselda. The truck screeched to a halt in front of the emergency room doors. Griselda leapt out, all covered head to toe in Jedediah's blood, screaming, Help! Help! There's been a terrible accident! Then chaos as attendants came flying. They chucked Jedediah and Papa away on gurneys, Papa with burns all over his face and groaning, Jedediah howling and thrashing to the point that 2 big male nurses had to hold him down, Griselda saying she was fine, it wasn't her blood. A nurse pulled Granny aside to a payment kiosk, rattling off questions while Granny calmly explained a propane leak had caused a hot water heater to explode, and Seth and Griselda were suddenly alone in the emergency waiting room. There was a big screen all decorated with a shimmering star on top. Christmas music played slowly over the speaker. God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Seth slumped down into a chair, put his face in his hands. You okay, honey? Griselda asked. Yeah, I'm fine, just shook up is all. I know what you mean, the whole thing, but, you know, this is going to sound crazy, but it's actually helped me somehow. I'm going to stay here, check into the rehab clinic, get myself together. Talking to you about your mother made me realise some things, how precious life can be. They were silent for a moment, each lost in the revelry of last night, the music echoing softly. To save us all from Satan's power when we are gone astray, or tidings of comfort and joy. Then Griselda continued, it was like a Christmas miracle. Seth seemed to know just what she meant and smiled at her. Everything's going to be all right, isn't it? She touched his face gently. Yes. Granny came up then and placed a hand on his shoulder. Come on, Seth, let's get us back to last chance. Time to go home. We've got a lot of cleaning up to do. Seth nodded and stood, waved goodbye to Griselda, and walked out of the big doors with his grandmother into the bright light of a Christmas morning. Thank you for listening.